Good evening, everyone. It's good to be back with you to study God's Word. We've made it all the way down to Acts chapter 19, verse 23. Kind of on the back side of the book of Acts. I hope you've been enjoying this lesson series so far as we've been studying the history of the early church and seeing how the early church impacted its world around them, and hopefully we can get some lessons about how we can better impact our world today. So let's take a look at Acts chapter 19, and I'll start reading in verse 23, and I'll go down to verse 27. So let's go ahead and jump right in. About that time there arose a great disturbance about the way. A silversmith named Demetrius, who made silver shrines of Artemis, brought in a lot of business for the craftsmen there. He called them together along with the workers in related trades and said, "You know, my friends, that we receive a good income from this business. And you see and hear how this fellow Paul has convinced and led astray large numbers of people here in Ephesus and in practically the whole province of Asia. He says that gods made by human hands are no gods at all. There is danger not only that our trade will lose its good name, but also that the temple of the great goddess Artemis will be discredited, and the goddess herself, who is worshipped throughout the province of Asia and the world, will be robbed of her divine majesty." Wow. Okay, so we've got a situation here once again where a riot is about to take place. So let me kind of bring you up to speed where we are. Let's go back to our map and let me show you where we are right now. We're here in Ephesus. Of course, this is what we call Asia Minor, modern day Turkey. And here in Ephesus, Paul is having a run-in with a guy named Demetrius, who is a silversmith, and he makes little shrines of the goddess Artemis. And I've got a picture of Artemis. I'll tell you a little bit about her here. Artemis, briefly, she's supposedly the daughter of Zeus and the twin of Apollos. She's a goddess of the hunt, a goddess of the wilderness, and she's also a goddess of fertility. So she has a role of as fertile mother, and these are supposedly multiple breasts on her figure here, and that is to remind people of her role as fertile mother. I have read where some people believe those are eggs and not breasts, so I'll let you draw your own conclusions on that. Either way, they're to remind the people who worship her that she is the goddess of fertility, and she was thought to come and help midwives deliver babies and whatnot. So she was a very popular goddess, and she's known by the name Diana among the Romans. So the Romans call her Diana, Greeks called her Artemis. But Ephesus was where her temple was located, and it was a very popular temple, a very rich temple. I have a picture of it as well. This is what it would have looked like in its glory. It was a massive structure. You can see some little figures of people here and some people down here. Kind of give you an idea of just how big this temple was and how popular it was. And these little shrines that he was making, some scholars say they weren't actually figures of Diana or Artemis herself, but they were more like little replicas of this temple. And what people would do is they would purchase these little replicas, and then they would take the replicas to the temple and make an offering with the replicas. And again, this temple was a very powerful place financially. Supposedly they could even make loans to people. So it was kind of a bank in a way. So it was a bank / temple. And this fellow named Demetrius, this silversmith, he made these little replicas of the temple. And I wouldn't rule out he probably made some replicas of Artemis as well. Probably did both, truth be known. And he had a very lucrative business, as did the other people that were involved in this idol-making business. If you will remember before, some of the people, when they converted to Christianity, they brought their scrolls, their magic scrolls, and had a big burning. And that was their idea of making a clean break from their past. But this guy, Demetrius, he's not willing to make a clean break. And the people that are in his trade guild, kind of like the labor union, he may even be kind of like the president of a labor union. He calls them all together and lets them know, hey, look, man, we're about to lose our livelihood here. And not only that, there's a great danger that we're going to lose our good name. Our trade's going to lose its good name. The goddess Artemis is going to be discredited, really robbed of her divine majesty, and things aren't going to go so well. So he appeals to them on an economic level and also on a religious level. And the people get worked up, and Demetrius is basically starting a riot here. And before we get to the riot itself, let's talk a little bit about what's going on and try to make some applications. A couple of questions here for you all out there watching so you can have a little interaction with us here tonight. First question is this: do you think Demetrius and his fellow workers were really interested in learning the truth about Jesus? Do you think Demetrius and his fellow craftsmen, his fellow silversmith workers, people making these little idols, were they really interested in learning the truth about Jesus? Which leads to the next question. What do you think really made them angry with Paul and his message? So think about that for just a moment. Because they really get upset. We're going to see in the very next verse, it says, when they heard this, they were furious and began shouting, "Great is Artemis of the Ephesians." So they're really upset. But what are they really upset about? And what is Demetrius really upset about?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Got any people giving me any answers there?
Not yet. Nathan just said good evening.
How many viewers do we have? Maybe they're tuning in late.
We got around 10-ish.
Okay, good.
So they're
Do you
there.
think Demetrius and his fellow workers were really interested in learning the truth about Jesus, number one? And what do you think really made them angry with Paul and his message? What is really at the heart of what's making Demetrius set off this riot? Well, if you notice in verse 24, it said they brought in no little business for the craftsmen. A silversmith named Demetrius, who made silver shrines of Artemis, brought in no little business for the craftsmen. Verse 25, he says, "Men, we receive a good income from this business."
He seems to be emphasizing something in those verses, what it sounds like to me.
Yeah. Verse 27, there is danger not only that our trade will lose its good name, but also that the temple of the great goddess Artemis will be discredited. And the goddess herself, who is worshipped throughout the province of Asia and the world, will be robbed of her divine majesty. Okay, nobody's answering?
Not yet.
Okay, I'll answer it for you. Wendy's put in an answer. What does she think?
Okay. Let's see. Wendy said, Demetrius was not wanting to hear the truth because he would have to change jobs. They were worried about losing the dollars. And then Nathan says, I think it's because they would lose their money.
Exactly. You guys nailed it. This guy is more interested in money than the truth. Imagine that. More interested in profit than in Jesus. And that's really what's got him worked up here. And he's trying to get these other people worked up as well, and he appears to be succeeding. And that's what's really got them angry with Paul in the message. They're just fearful that they're going to lose some money. So they're getting all excited about this. What are some ways the gospel today could mess up someone's business? Or what are some businesses out there that the gospel could mess up? Let y'all think about that for a moment. What are some ways that the gospel today could mess up somebody's business? Can you think of any professions that would have to change if all of a sudden some of the workers became Christians, or the owner became a Christian, or the manager became a Christian, or the guy behind the counter became a Christian? What are some ways the gospel today could mess up somebody's business? I know one time I worked for a guy who asked me to do something illegal, and I told him as a Christian I couldn't do it. I won't go into the details of it, but it involved satellites and making these things that descramble signals illegally, and I wasn't going to actually do anything, but
he asked like me to CIA stuff, John, in previous life.
Well, I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
But anyway, I just said I don't want to be. I can't be involved in any of that, because as a Christian I just couldn't do it. So that's one example in my life where, as a Christian, I just couldn't go along with anything dishonest like that.
Yeah, I remember. Maybe I won't say where this was, but in a previous job, I was asked when we had a Black Friday sale, I was directly told not to say what the previous price was, because the company actually at times the Black Friday price was more expensive than it was a week ago on their regular sale price, and they directly told me not to tell people what the previous price was. Yeah. Well, I didn't listen to them, and some people specifically asked, is this actually a good deal? Is this actually on sale? And I told them, I'll be honest, I was told not to tell you this, but I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to say this is a better price, because they said, what was the price a week ago? And I told them, they're like, it's $500 more than it was a week ago. I'm like, yeah. They said, isn't that kind of lying? I was like, I don't know, but I'm certainly not going to lie to you what the price was. And some are like, wow, I'm at least glad that you at least told me that,
Yeah.
But, I was directly told that I was not allowed to tell them what the previous price was. Or I was specifically said, well, won't that be lying? He says, well, what's wrong with that? And so I didn't go along with what he said.
Mm-hmm.
So like you said, some people in their jobs, you can put on the line sometimes. So,
yeah.
We got a couple of responses here. Nathan said, casinos, gambling places, there's a plethora of places. And then Wendy said, pornography, prostitution, crooked lawyers, price gouging in stores, government officials. Would have to be honest.
Wow.
So that's quite the list right there.
Right. Yeah, it's clearly once you become a Christian, you have to put God and his values above money. That's what Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount. He said you can't serve both God and money.
Yep.
And he's putting money in the category of a God with a little g, because really that's really what it gets down to a lot of times. People are either going to worship God, or they're going to worship money in various ways by putting money ahead of God and his values. And that's really what's going on here. Paul's preaching the truth, and it is doing damage to this idol worship that's going on, because the people that make the idols are going to lose some money. And the people that are making money off the temple, they're going to lose some money. And this guy's just speaking up and saying, hey man, look what's going on. All these people are going over to Christianity. It's going to cost us. And so they're choosing to go with the money. And
I made a note on here, like you're saying. I asked, let's see, what did I say? In this, are they seeking the truth? And it doesn't seem like that's the motives here. They're not asking if Paul's right or not.
They're seeking the money.
Yeah.
The truth is not even important to them. Yeah.
Yeah. And even when they say Artemis, you notice what comes first, not Artemis. It comes, hey guys, we're all in the same business here. We know that this is cutting into our budget. Then it's like afterward, secondary. Now, what are we going to tell the people when we want to stir them all up? We're not going to tell them it's because of our money, because they're probably not going to care.
Well, this guy's, pardon the pun, crafty. He's playing on the religious fervor of the people too.
Yeah.
So money's really at the back of this thing, but he's also bringing in, this Artemis, her divine majesty. They thought her image came from heaven.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I found this kind of interesting. This word image is also from the word we get from meteorite. So they thought she came down from heaven. Perhaps it was a meteorite, and they took
came down,
fashioned this image some way. I don't know. But anyway, they worshipped her, and this guy is playing on their religious fervor, trying to get the people worked up. But when I was thinking about the money thing, I thought about that incident in Mark's Gospel, Mark chapter 5, where Jesus cast the demons into those pigs. The guy said, "We're a legion." 6,000 demons went into a couple thousand pigs, and the pigs committed suicide. Pardon the pun there. They went over the cliff, and they drowned. But the people, rather than be glad, because the man that had been possessed, they find him dressed in his right mind, because he'd been acting crazy and running around, no clothes on, cutting himself. And they find him in his right mind and dressed and everything. And rather than rejoice, they asked Jesus to leave their region.
Oh yeah, that always confused me for the longest time as a new Christian. I'm like, why would they ask him to leave him? And I never knew
because all those pigs died.
Yeah,
they're thinking, hey man, Jesus just cost us a couple of thousand pigs.
Yeah,
please just get out of here.
Yeah.
So to them, the money and the pigs,
that's what mattered,
were more important than Jesus. So this is nothing new. We still see it today. People putting money ahead of God and his values.
Same thing with the Pharisees, and Jesus went into the temple, and they're selling everything inside of the temple, and you got a nice little town square selling party in the middle of a church service. It's like, well, how are you supposed to pray or worship here? You're sitting there selling, dudes yelling, 5 for 3, 5 for 3, and someone's trying to worship the Lord, and Jesus goes in there, flips the temple and cracks a whip on them, not metaphorically, literally.
Well, I think that's one of the things I think tithing teaches us. It's a reminder to keep putting God first. Because a lot of people, they can't give the 10%. They can, but they won't.
Yeah.
And by not, that looks to me like that might be more important to them than God, because it's a way to keep your values in check, if you ask me. And so I think 10's a good place to start.
Well, it puts what's more important. You can, everyone can technically afford the 10%, but the question is, I was reading something not too long ago where the American lifestyle always lives a couple notches above what they actually can afford. So the question, not every country does that. That's only a lot of Western countries. Not other countries do this. So it's not all humans who do this, but America does this, where we want to live a couple notches above other people. Well, the question is that you can always knock yourself down to the notch you're at, and then you'll afford the things that are most important. But to live those couple notches, you have to decide what's most important to be able to notch it down a couple notches. Yeah. So that's a problem that we have here in Western countries, like the United States.
And two, it's not necessarily the money people are worshiping, but it's the pleasure it can bring them.
Right.
Or the security that it can make them feel. See, rather than trust in God and feel secure in Him, it's like, I feel secure in all this money. This money's going to make my problems go away.
Yeah.
And of course it doesn't. But when they're worshiping money, it's like really worshiping materialism and living beyond their means and all those kind of things you're talking about.
I even had a manager in the past where he said he had so many subscriptions to things that where he was losing hundreds upon hundreds of dollars every month. He said, I don't even know what I'm subscribed to any longer. He said, I have so many subscriptions to online things that I don't even know where to go to unsubscribe to them, because I don't even watch most of these things. And it's taking hundreds of his dollars out like every month, and he doesn't even know, because he's just, again, like, sometimes we don't even know what we're even doing sometimes when we're involved in all of that. So,
but I think when we have our finances set where we can give God that first 10%, it kind of forces us to get everything else in order.
Yeah.
And it shows God that He's more important than money. He's more important to us than the money.
Well, it's kind of like your bills. Like one thing that I've been taught by people much wiser than me is set all your bills to be like the first week of the month, including your rent, electricity, and all of that. So then everything most important is taken care of. I think everyone on here will agree too that your rent is really important to be paid, because you won't be living somewhere very quickly. Your water, which you need, if bathing's important and drinking is important, washing your hands is important, that's going to be on the list. And same thing with your electricity. If you love air conditioner, you're going to make sure that electricity's paid. So I guess that's the thing, is that we value all those things, and that it's a wise thing to put those in the beginning. So the same thing when it comes to tithing. If God and his people and his ministry is important, we'll try to make sure that that goes at the top, and then what's left over, have some fun with it, because God wants us to have fun with our money to an extent. He doesn't want it to be just like stifled. You can't do anything with it. I mean, because God wants us to have, it's a blessing to have the money too.
It's just a concrete way to show him that he's more important to us than money.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's also, I don't think we should leave this out. There's also this idea that they do love this goddess Artemis. That is part of this, because that really gets them worked up there toward the end of verse 27.
Mm-hmm.
So they clearly do not want to give up the worship of Artemis or going to that beautiful temple and worshiping.
Mm-hmm.
That's clearly something that they do not want to give up, which reminds me of how today there are clearly things that people do not want to give up for Jesus. There's, rather than go over to him and accept him as Savior and Master, there's something they don't want to give up, just like with these people. Yeah, there was some economic pain they didn't want to go through, but there was also something to do with this religion that they enjoyed too.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't want to give it up. So with that in mind, what are some things today that people do not want to give up that prevents them from coming to Christ? What are some hang-ups or some things people just won't let go of?
That's a good question right there.
It's obviously not Artemis, but it's probably things that are similar to Artemis.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen anyone with Artemis yet. I don't think. I don't remember that in high school or college.
Yeah.
But is there another quote unquote Artemis in the life?
Yeah. Yeah, their concern is the great goddess Artemis will be discredited. And the goddess herself, who is worshipped throughout the province of Asia and the world, will be robbed of her divine majesty. So there is some religious ideology going on here. There's a threat to this religion, and they're not willing to just come to Jesus and say, you know what, this thing is pretty much, this Greek mythology stuff's pretty much a fairy tale. I'm going over to the one true God. Keep in mind, Paul's worked some miracles in Ephesus too. Handkerchiefs, that he's touched or healing people. So God's backing up this Christian religion,
right,
with miracles. And this Artemis is nothing but a bunch of silver shrines and little idols and little trinkets and replicas of the temple. That's all it is. But they're not willing to give that up and all that's associated with it for Jesus. So what are some things today that people just can't seem to give up?
And it seems to be, maybe without talking about it, there seem to be some benefits more than likely that are probably attached to going to this temple. Some goodies you can maybe get out of it. Maybe that's another way of saying it. And they emphasize province of Asia, so there seems to be some type of locality advantage and maybe a little bit of pride. In fact, it's ours is possibly going on there as well. I don't know. Nathan said music is a big one, I think. Also movies and TV, basically all the lust of the flesh.
Wow.
So that's definitely a full list right there, I think.
Yeah, I mean there's some no doubt people out there that know following Christ is the right thing to do, but there's just some things in their life they won't give up. It could be, we've already mentioned some of them. It could be pornography.
Yeah.
Just not willing to give that up. Just don't want to get rid of it. Might be weed, smoking weed all the time. They just don't want to give up the weed.
Yeah.
Excessive drinking. There's just all kinds of things. Maybe some kind of immoral relationship they're in. There's all kinds of things people don't want to give up for the Lord.
I know some people, they just live for the weekends and they just go off. And now the drugs and alcohol, you tend to be attached to it, but they don't tend to let go of that type of lifestyle where they're not advancing themselves or taking responsibility for other people or trying to strive in their life. And then there's some people who's just, all I wait for is that weekend, man. Just all of that stuff that's involved in that and have a great time and then back in the slug of Monday.
And there's some people that live every night like it's Saturday.
Yeah.
That's one of my sayings my dad used to like to use. Can't live every night like it's Saturday, that's what he'd say.
Yeah.
But he's something else. We won't go into him right now.
Maybe another day.
Yeah.
Dorothy said their adulterous lifestyle.
Yeah, they just don't want to give that up.
Yeah.
Probably when you get right down to it, that's why people don't become Christians, is there's some part of themselves they don't want to give up. Something that, like Nathan's saying, something that their flesh enjoys doing that they're not willing to make a clean break from. And they may even intend to one day make a break from it, but they just never get around to it.
Yeah.
You know, they keep pushing it off and keep pushing it off, and the years go by and the years go by. And that's dangerous because you can get desensitized. You can sear your conscience.
Yeah.
Your heart can become hardened. So procrastination is very dangerous,
In fact,
spiritually especially.
like you said, there's a friend of mine, Parker, and he's helping us out as a co-host on the podcast now. And we had a discussion kind of about this before, and he was talking to a couple guys about the faith and everything like that, and they were talking more on a intellectual level. I'll have to admit, when a lot of things were talking about, like psychology and philosophy and a lot of things like that, but also just talking about the nature of God and stuff like that. But he finally came out and asked this question. He said, if it was actually true, would you follow it or not? He said there was a big silence, and they said no. And he said, I was concluded in the end, this wasn't an intellectual thing with them. There's things they don't want to give up in their life of why they did. That's where it came from. It wasn't an intellectual, is it actually real? It's they just didn't want to give something up.
There's people out there that claim they're atheist, but they really haven't done a lot of research. They just say that so they can keep smoking weed or whatever they're wanting to do.
Yeah.
And they just throw that out there to make themselves sound smart, but that's not really it. It takes a lot of faith to look around at all the order and everything in the world and say, oh, it all just happened, man.
Yeah.
That's what I think. But if there's something you want to hang on to, so you can just throw that out there, oh, I'm an atheist, But that's really not the issue. It's really something you enjoy indulging in that you don't want to give up.
Yep.
So keep that in mind. Next time you run into somebody that says, I'm an atheist, or I'm an agnostic, I really don't know.
Yeah.
Well, no, there's something you don't want to give up, dude. That's what it is. That's usually
Especially the agnostics, they just don't want to. They don't want to pull the trigger because they just want to sit on the line because things don't pan out well for me. I could just, in their mind, I could just tell God, well, I don't know.
They try to come off as sounding smart and intelligent and all that, but this really gets down to they don't want to give up something. They don't want to repent, basically.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so let's get back to old Demetrius here. He's got everybody all worked up into a frenzy. He's appealed to them on an economic level, and he's appealed to them on a religious level, and they're all excited. And let's get right to verse 28. It says, when they heard this, they were furious and began shouting, great is Artemis of the Ephesians. Soon the whole city was in an uproar. The people seized Gaius and Aristarchus, Paul's traveling companions from Macedonia, and all of them rushed into the theater together. Paul wanted to appear before the crowd, but the disciples would not let him. Even some of the officials of the province, friends of Paul's, sent him a message begging him not to venture into the theater. The assembly was in confusion. Some were shouting one thing, some another. Most of the people did not even know why they were there. The Jews in the crowd pushed Alexander to the front, and they shouted instructions to him. He motioned for silence in order to make a defense before the people. But when they realized he was a Jew, they shouted in unison for about 2 hours, great is Artemis of the Ephesians. So the people are really all worked into a frenzy, and they rush into the largest facility in Ephesus, this large open-air theater. It had a seating capacity of over 24,000 people. It's kind of served as the meeting place for the people to gather and make decisions, but this was no organized decision making. This was basically an out-of-control, riotous situation. They grabbed two of Paul's companions, Gaius and Aristarchus. I don't know where Paul was. Maybe they couldn't find him at the time. Maybe he was hiding. I don't know, but they get their hands on these two, and notice it says that they rushed as one man into this great theater. And a lot of the people are just sort of caught up in this crowd. They don't even know what they are rioting about. So this riot had sort of taken on a mind of its own. And that's one of the dangerous things about a riot is people get to the point where they're doing things that they normally wouldn't do. It's almost like a peer pressure kind of thing where everybody's trying to one-up everybody. And it's just had a mind of its own. And it's kind of shocking that there were people caught up in this thing that didn't even know why they were there. They didn't even know what they were doing. They're just caught up in it. And that's dangerous.
Yeah.
So it's a mixture of religious fervor. Even got a little racism thrown in there because when they find out this guy trying to talk is a Jew, they start shouting even louder. So we've got all the components of a combustible situation. You know, religion and racism, those two. And all these things are working together, and they don't even know why they're there. Some of them. They're just there to just raise Cain, man.
I know we keep running into this rioting stuff, and it keeps on reminding me to some extent what's going on these days, what stuff is going on right now. Lots of, like it says, confusion going on here. We don't really know what's going on with some people. Some people don't even know why they're there. Yeah,
it was like right after the George Floyd incident, there were a lot of people looting and burning, and it's like completely lost focus of what they're even protesting about.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's people, no doubt, all caught up in this thing, and if you interviewed them, they probably couldn't give you a coherent reason why they're there other than to burn up something or rob somebody or just throw something or hurt somebody.
I just saw someone else upset and acting crazy. So, you know, and some of these people, what always tends to be going on in Scripture is it says these are, doesn't say losers, but it says something along those lines like these are even the ones who stirred up some confusion against Jesus, like rabble rousers. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Like these people are looking for something to be angry at. They're looking for something to do.
Yeah.
They probably don't have much of a life, honestly.
Yeah.
And so this is the excitement of their life because there's nothing going on with their lives right now. So they just want to burn, loot, do all that because it's worth it because, I mean, I don't have anything going on. So why not? And then in the end, you know, we'll get to in a minute, in the next couple verses, it's, What about what's right? I mean, is this right to do this or?
Yeah, well, that's what's dangerous about something degenerating into a riot. So, like a peaceful protest, there's nothing wrong with that. But when the bricks start flying and frozen water bottles and Molotov cocktails and who knows what, gunshots and everything else, that's when it's out of control. And people would be wise to withdraw from something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's one of the things bugging me lately. I don't think people should be running interference for people that are caught up in that. You know, if my advice to somebody, if you're going is to peacefully protest, that's one thing. But when it turns into a riotous situation, if you're smart, you'll get out of there because you don't want to get caught up in that. Especially you don't want to get caught up in doing something you wasn't planning to do. I mean, your emotions could get the best of you. You could get caught up in something that you normally wouldn't do.
Right.
Next thing you know, you find yourself in jail or shot or hurt or worse, killed or something, you know, or losing an eye or all kind of bad stuff can happen.
Right.
So I think rioting is very dangerous. I mean, because you're seeing in the text right here, people don't even know what they're doing at some point. Now, of course, Demetrius knew what he was doing, and some of his fellow craftsmen knew what they were doing, but the people that got caught up in this thing, they were just pulled into it. They didn't even know what they were doing. They were just there taking part in it.
Like some of these people, let's use an example of the anarchists. They know what they're doing. It's not they're not new to this.
Right.
Like, that's a good example is they're going in there to burn, loot, destroy, hurt people, intimidate them, beat them.
Travel all over the country. Funded by somebody. You know, they know what they're doing.
And then there could be someone who's, you know, let's say someone is peacefully protesting. That's just their motive. They see that. They could think, oh, well, look the way he's acting. And then this group mentality goes into, oh, look, he just loves Floyd, for instance. Well, maybe I have to be doing this. And so you could jump in there and you don't know this guy's motives.
It's really exploiting people's emotions. Because there's people that, well, I think this guy in the text, Demetrius, did that. He was exploiting the emotions of the people. You know, getting them all excited, getting them all worked up, and almost somebody gets killed over this.
Yeah.
These two guys, and of course Paul's wanting to get out there and present his case, and says the disciples wouldn't let him. I wonder what that was like. Can you imagine?
I guess they just
can
must
you
have been
imagine
holding him back.
holding Paul down or holding him back?
That's what I imagine. They just got all hands on deck.
And a couple of the officials here, a couple of politicians that are on Paul's side are sympathetic toward him. They're begging him not to venture into this theater.
Because I think they know what's going to happen to him.
Yeah,
he can
get ripped to pieces.
Yeah, stoned just in the middle of everyone, and that's the end of Paul.
Okay, so let's see what happens here next. We're going to see a city official try to calm these people down. Verse 35 said the city clerk quieted the crowd and said, "Fellow Ephesians, doesn't all the world know that the city of Ephesus is the guardian of the temple of the great Artemis and of her image, which fell from heaven? Therefore, since these facts are undeniable, you ought to calm down and not do anything rash. You have brought these men here, though they have neither robbed temples nor blasphemed our goddess. If then Demetrius and his fellow craftsmen have a grievance against anybody, the courts are open and there are proconsuls. They can press charges. If there's anything further you want to bring up, it must be settled in a legal assembly. As it is, we are in danger of being charged with rioting because of what happened today. In that case, we would not be able to account for this commotion, since there is no reason for it." After he had said this, he dismissed the assembly. So this city official, part of his job involved publishing the decisions of the assembly. When they'd gather the people together, they'd come to a decision and made sure it was in line with Roman law, and then he would publish it out there for everybody to know. So he was sort of a liaison between the Roman administration and the city citizens. So he speaks and the people listen because they're used to listening to this guy. And he's able to get them calmed down, and he basically makes two arguments for why they should knock it off. First of all, he says, I'm going to paraphrase here, he says, keep the faith. So look, Artemis, her image is fallen from heaven, and we have her temple here, and she's worshipped all over the empire. Everything's going to be all right. And second, he tells them that they must follow the legal procedures. That these guys really haven't done anything wrong, but if they wanted to press charges, they must do it in a legal manner. Go through the proper procedures is what he's saying. And he's letting them know that if they get charged with rioting, the city is going to be in big trouble. They could lose some of their rights and their privileges. I mean, the Romans could just strip the whole city of their privileges. They could start taxing them. They could strip the people of their citizenship. They could get in big trouble. I started thinking, what would that be like today if the government could do that to a city? You know, this, for example, in, say, Portland or somewhere, and say, okay, if you don't knock off the rioting, we're just going to strip all of your citizenship. You're no longer going to be citizens of America, and you're not going to have the rights and legal privileges of the rest of us.
That'll change things real quick for the majority of people.
Well, that would. Now, I'm not saying do that.
Yeah.
So please don't misunderstand me. I'm using that as an example.
Yeah.
Because this little speech gets their attention and defuses the situation. That's why I'm bringing it to your attention. This was serious business. In fact, the Romans had a law that read, and I'm quoting here, it says, "He who raises a mob, let him be punished with death." So it was a capital offense to instigate a riot. This guy, Demetrius, could have got himself in big trouble. I mean, there could have been fines levied against him. He could have had his property confiscated, or he could have been killed.
Yeah, the Romans were known to do that.
And this guy is speaking up and saying, look, you really don't have any charges against these guys. Do we really want to do this?
Right.
Is it going to be worth it? So he's trying to talk them out of it. And he is successful. After he said this, he dismissed the assembly, and everybody pretty much went home. So this whole situation gets defused by some good logic. So he calls them back to their senses. But we really can't get the force of it because we don't see how serious it is to be charged with rioting. I mean, in America today, like in New York, you can get charged with rioting and then you don't even have to post any bail. You just get right out and go back and do it again. You know, go tear up something else, get in, he's let you right back out.
Right.
But that wasn't the case back then. I mean, you could lose your life. And you say, why was rioting so serious? Well, I'm going to tell you why it's so serious, because if you have a breakdown of law and order, you have a breakdown in civilization itself. That's why rioting is so dangerous. Believe me, you do not want to live in a place of rioting. I'm not talking about protesting. I'm talking about burning up, tearing up, killing. No, If that happens on a large scale, you don't have a civilization anymore.
Right.
So that's why law and order is very important. You're going to see it in this presidential campaign become more and more of an issue, I predict. Law and order is very serious.
Well, enough people have their property destroyed or their business is destroyed. Something has to be done about that. And if that was me, would that become an issue in this election? Then it would, because your livelihood has just been destroyed at that point. And that's a lot of people right now.
Yeah, I don't know. You know, there's probably people watching this or all over the place in the political spectrum.
Yeah.
But I ask you this question. How would you like for a band of people just to come and burn your house down? Or come vandalize your car, beat the windshield out of your car with a bat? How would you like that?
Yeah.
They can say, well, we're protesting. We're peacefully protesting and destroying your car. Would you like that? I don't think anybody would like that.
No.
So really, we don't want to degenerate into something like that.
Right.
Because what kind of country would you have if it becomes lawless? You know, so it is serious. And if some of this stuff's not cracked down upon, it could really get ugly.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm surprised more people hadn't been killed already. I mean, if this had happened probably 30, 40 years ago, the National Guard had been called out.
Yep.
Like my dad, he was in the National Guard. He was telling me at Ole Miss. Can't think of the guys. The first black student was brought in down there, and he was in the National Guard, and he was sent down there, and they had the bayonets and all, and they went forward, and they stopped it. I mean, the racists were bust in from all over the South and everywhere, and they were throwing bricks and everything, but the National Guard was brought in, and they squashed it, and that was the end of that.
Yeah.
And that's you just can't let rioters tear up everything.
Because if you have a problem with something, let's go with the city clerk says. You have a grievance, you can press charges,
James
you can
Meredith,
go to a legal
that guy's name, I
assembly.
think.
Yeah. And it's the same case with all these things.
Yeah.
Propose your case, go to a legal assembly, and get it done. We have a country where that is actually possible to be done.
Yeah.
And apparently, and to an extent, Rome was too. And even we're supposed to be respect.
And no system is perfect either. There's going to be corruption. There's going to be people bought off. There's going to be all kind of.
Well, even Paul and Jesus advocate for them to accept the Roman government, which was definitely corrupt on certain levels. And I mean, it was a straight up dictatorship. And he said to respect that government. How much more this free country that we have, where everyone's basically, to the degree as much as we can, equal. Now, some people will argue with that and how much, but the Rome back then was very debatable in that equation. I mean, heavily. I mean, they had slaves all over the place. So, you know, you could just imagine. And they were still supposed to respect that government. So same thing here. If we have a problem, we need to go through those channels. And on top of that, I think we all know that Paul and his people were praying for this city clerk to elevate things down and he could have been the friend that is possibly being mentioned here, and possibly also, you know, Paul and his people are probably praying for this to blow over, their friend doesn't get killed out there, this doesn't become a problem with Ephesus and they have to leave or something like that. I don't know about you, but I think God was all over this, the fact that this got calmed down, where, I mean, they were shouting for 2 hours in front of this guy. Great is Artemis of the Ephesians. Man, you shouting that for 2 hours. I mean, you were stirred up to a high degree.
And this thing probably got patriotism. It's all wrapped up in because, you know, she was like the goddess of that city. Everybody came to their city to, you know, a lot of people came there to worship.
Yeah.
Had that big, awesome temple there. And there was one before this temple I read about. It was one of the 7 wonders of the world. So this kind of put them on the map.
Yeah.
So there's some patriotism wrapped up. You know, Paul's preaching against, you know, the very thing that makes our city famous. You know, so there's all that involved here.
Yeah.
And so
I think you get that in verse 27, where it says, goddess herself who is worshipped throughout the province of Asia and the world. And there you go. So they've included that in a reason to get everyone stirred up. So there you go.
People are coming from all over the known world to Ephesus to worship at this temple.
Yeah, I've heard about it being one of the 7 wonders of the world. I mean, for context for everyone else, the pyramids are also up there when it comes to one of the wonders of the world. So that's high on the list.
Yeah. So anyway, it gets defused and everything settles down. So I guess one major lesson is, you know, sometimes people will listen to reason.
Yeah.
And reason is the way to work your way through some of the emotions that get out of control.
And he wasn't coming in with And he was also tactful, let's be honest here. The city clerk is being tactful. He hits them first with kind of a compliment. Hey, you know,
He says, let's
Artemis
not do
is
anything
awesome.
rash.
Yeah.
Verse 36, that's the key, right? Don't do anything rash.
Yeah.
We ought to be quiet and not do anything rash.
Then he's kind of like, hey, Artemis is awesome and everything like that. So he kind of gives that to him, you know, it's an awesome statue. No one's denying that. So he just kind of throws that out there as a compliment to them. But then, you know, he gets, you know, he doesn't also glance over. None of this stuff is, he says in a tactful way, none of this is legal. We can get in a whole lot of trouble. Let's kind of cut it out because, like you said, is it worth it? So he's kind of, you know, he's coming to that approach.
I think that is the approach. Is it really worth it?
Yeah.
Is it going to be worth it for us to lose our citizenship? Possibly. Is it going to be worth it for us to get all these fines levied upon us if we continue this? Is it really going to be worth it? Of course, it's not going to be worth it.
Yeah.
So they all.
And he's also saying pretty much, I'm not going to back you if you go further with this. So I'm kind of cleaned of my hands with this.
Yep.
You want to get, you know,
you have a
citizen
problem,
stripped and all of that.
Yeah, if you have a problem with these two, with Paul and company, you just take them to court.
Yeah.
And work it out there. That's what we need to handle. The way we need to handle it. Okay, we're running low of time here. Let's. Does anybody else make any?
There was a few more comments in here. Let's see what the first one was. Wendy, I think this is a compliment when it was talking about earlier what you're sacrificing when it comes to getting away from certain gods and idols. They would have to give up friends, fun, and freedom, I think. And I think that's a good point. I think all of those involved in idols today, I think, are involved in that.
Although you do have friends, and you gain more friends, real friends in church, and I have a pretty good time myself. So
yeah, you lose certain friends, certain fun, and certain freedoms, but I think you gain friends, fun, and also freedom.
Believe me, following Jesus is the way to go.
Yeah,
there's nothing like it. You get fulfilled in Him.
Nathan just put Ecclesiastes 1:9. I don't know that off the top of my head.
Nathan's he's educating us tonight, isn't he?
Yeah, I like it. Let's see if I can go ahead and find this. I know it's in here in the wisdom books. Psalms is a big book right there in the middle of the scriptures. So 1:9. What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. So that's a great quote right there, because what was in people's hearts in the past is no different than it is today with all this
Technology has changed, but human nature hadn't.
Yeah.
All right, let's close with prayer.
All right.
Our Father in heaven, I just pray that we can learn from the mistakes of the past. I pray, God, that we can put you above all things. I pray that none of us will put money ahead of you and your values. I pray that we would always be willing to give up the material things of this world, the fleeting things, things that don't last, for the things that will never fade away. And we just thank you for Jesus, and I pray, God, that we can be as dedicated as Paul and as effective as Paul when it comes to sharing your word with the people around us. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.